welcome back to my channel, fellow gardeners. Today I want to talk about repotting because basically it is very important for us as gardeners to know that we should be repotting at least once a year. As your plant is growing and outgrows the pot, you need to put it into a one size bigger pot. So let's have a look at this and then also talk about when you should repot and how you should repot. So my name is Alice and I'm the Red Soil Gardener. So fellow gardeners, now when do you have to repot? Basically here in Kenya our temperatures are usually quite steady from 20 in the cold season and it does go up to 30. In the northern hemisphere where you do have the different seasons, you usually find that during the winter season your plant goes into dormancy. Now what happens when the plant does go into dormancy, everything does slow down. It's just conserving its energy, and as soon as spring comes, that's when you get your new shoots, and that is the perfect time to repot your plant. Repotting is great during spring because, as I mentioned, this is when you get the growth of the plant. So in a way is that as you do repot, your plant is in that energy of growth. So you won't get your plant dying off as opposed to repotting during the winter period where your plant is actually sleeping. Now, when do you repot a plant? Now, I found this plant, it's my Dieffenbachia, and I had it in, I actually had cut a stem and thought, oh, let me propagate this, although I do have a few in the garden. And actually, I forgot about it. It just sat there, and what happens is, if you notice, the pot is actually really small, and my dear little plant, look at the size of those leaves. So I looked at it the other day and I thought, this is the ideal time. Now I should actually move that plant into a bigger pot. Now, what sort of pot size do I look for? Now, the thing about repotting is they always say you move into one size bigger pot. So if you have a 4-inch pot, you will go for a 5-inch pot. Now, the thing is that I've seen situations where you take this size Dieffenbachia and then you move it into a bigger pot that size and hope that your plant will grow. Now, what happens is as you've just repotted it and the roots are trying to find its way in the soil and you've put it in a much bigger pot, what happens is by pouring so much water into the bigger pot, that the soil doesn't dry out that quickly. So what happens is you've taken your repotted plant into a damp soil, and then what will happen in the end, you will get root rot. And second thing is that with your small little plant, in a much bigger pot, what happens is the roots are really going to put a lot of energy to look for that water, so you may not even get any growth at the top. Another reason to actually, one of the other reasons to actually repot your plant is, and you can actually notice, like with this one, as I mentioned earlier, is when it gets top heavy compared to the size of the pot. So this is a good indication you need to repot your plant. Another indication is when you do turn it over and you look at the drainage holes, you may find that all the roots are coming out from here. It's basically the roots have actually exhausted the pot and now it's looking for different outlets. That's a good indication that you should be repotting your plant at that particular point. Another thing about repotting is that sometimes when you do take that plant outside, remove it from the smaller pot, you will find that the roots have made a circle around the pot, which basically it's running out of space. And then you may find that the roots actually are quite root bound, and the ratio of roots to soil is minimum soil. So what happens is that as the plant is producing all this root and getting all this nutrient from the soil, and the soil depletes itself, is that what happens is you will get stunted growth. Your leaves in different types of plants, your leaves may fall out because basically it's not getting the nutrients. So by moving it into a bigger size pot with adequate soil, the plant will rejuvenate because it has all that soil nutrient to revive itself. Now, another indication that basically your soil with the roots actually taking over the pot and less soil is that when you do water your plant, is the water just drains completely through very quickly. Now that is an indication that basically the soil has been depleted and there's not enough soil to actually absorb that moisture. So all you're doing is actually just pouring water and water coming out. That is a good indication that you must repot your plant, put it in a bigger pot and with adequate soil. So I'm going to tip this one over, and then we'll try to put it into a slightly bigger pot, because if I look at the size of those leaves, I think that would be adequate for this plant. So I'm just going to put this one aside and we're going to tip this one over. Here we go. So there's my plant. So what I'm going to do here is maybe I can soak it here. And we have a look at the leaves, the roots. And it actually is going around. Oh my gosh. Just give me a minute. Yes, we have. So what I'm trying to do here is actually look at the roots and see what has happened to the roots. Now, if I look at these roots, as I said, they're actually going around like that. So once it was in the pot, it's actually getting strangled. So this is my rooting structure. So I think what we'll do with this one, again, just open it up gently, the roots, as it's all going around in circles. There we go. And what we're going to do is actually clean it up and get rid of the dead roots, and then we start afresh. So what I'm going to do is, I've got some water here, so I'm going to put that water there, put this one aside, and then we'll clean up this thing. Once you do have your plant, it actually looks quite nice. Once you do have your plant, of course, you'll start thinking, what sort of pot am I going to use? Now, if you do use a terracotta pot is actually great for things like cacti and succulents, because basically the pot is porous, and so it doesn't retain moisture for a very long time. So things like cacti or succulents, which actually does like to be slightly dry for a longer time before its next feed, a terracotta pot is actually ideal. Now, another thing is that if you do want to have, for indoor plants or something that usually likes an evenly moist soil, I would go for a plastic pot. Now, plastic pots will retain moisture as opposed to a terracotta pot. And also it is quite good for people who are traveling and out of home, because the thing is that your plastic pot will retain that moisture until you come back, so you don't have a drying out. So another thing you must have, especially if you're planting in pots, whether it's a terracotta pot or it's a plastic pot, you must have drainage holes. Drainage holes actually help the water get into the plant and actually takes the excess water out. Now, sometimes it is better, like for a plant, is sometimes you can do water it twice, in terms that you water it the first time, let the water drain out of your drainage hole, give it a few minutes, then re-water it again and let it completely seep through. Now, the reason why this is quite important is sometimes is that if you do look, I've done this once, but if you look at it, what happens is the soil hasn't totally absorbed the moisture. So a good 2 runs is actually good because the moisture will be retained in the soil. So with this pot, which I am actually going to repot my Dieffenbachia, is I'm going to give it another run and the water will drain through its drainage hole like that. You see the drainage, and in that way the soil will be moist. So now a lot of people do have saucers, and I think saucers are really great, especially for indoor plants, because what happens is that as you water, the water drains through and it's in the saucer. And sometimes I do actually love having a saucer because I like to water from below. As the water is sitting in the saucer, it does sort of permeate and get quicker to the roots. But what I do find with my outside pots, whether it's terracotta or plastic, I sometimes don't bother with having saucers because basically the water will drain through, and I do water my plants at least twice every second day or every 1 week, but I just let the water just drain into the soil. So what I'm going to do is we're going to repot this plant. I have moved from this tiny pot, and this is slightly bigger only because I feel as if the top is quite heavy. If I did move maybe an inch bigger from this pot, it is top heavy, so I've just gone for this pot. So what I'm going to do is actually look at this, and I'm going to remove any leaves that, any roots that are discolored, that doesn't look healthy. And then also I will sort of prune some of these long roots here, and also just check your plant and see if there's any sort of pests that are happening here. But so far I think it does look quite healthy, but I may even just, no, it does look quite healthy in fact. And I am getting another sprout here. But so what I'm going to actually do is just snip some of these long roots like that and remove this discolored one there and this one there. But otherwise I think I'm quite happy with that. So what I'm going to do now is actually put it into this pot and just lay it down like that, and just simply cover like that. It's a well-draining soil, it's got pumice in it. And it's got compost and a bit of potting soil. Make sure you get the corners in, and there we go. Last thing is I'm going to just water it. And again, because I've added new potting soil, I'll just let it drain through, and then I will remove the excess water. And then what I will do is put it in indirect sun, and because we don't want it to go into a transplant shock where suddenly the roots are trying to fight for survival, and then we get wilting of the top leaves. So simple in indirect sun in a warm place and let the roots actually start maturing. So thank you, fellow gardeners. There we are. My different butcher hopefully is happy. I'm going to spill that water. Is happy, and I'm so happy that I have moved it into a bigger pot, because it was actually looking a bit pathetic in a small pot. But now with this pot, the proportions are actually correct, because now if it does actually start rooting and holding itself, anchoring in the soil, is the proportions are actually good. So thank you so much. Don't forget to like and share. Don't forget to subscribe. Press that notification button. We are on Instagram. I do post a lot on Instagram. Do send me your comments through Facebook or through YouTube. I'm always there to answer. And we do upload our videos every Thursday. And thank you so much for your support. We're very thankful. And until next time, do have a happy gardening week, and bye.